These are all the real food ingredients that provide your body everything it needs to build size and muscle. Now, let's get it faster. Flex Food is 46 real food ingredients on demand for real muscle building meals and real results fast.
Let's go to the next topic, guys. This is a question for both of you, obviously, but Doctor, you can start. Steroid abuse. What is steroid abuse, and does such thing actually exist?
Well, steroids have been around for, I don't know, since the 1950s and 60s. You know, guys like Schwarzenegger in the golden years in the 70s started using performance enhancing drugs to, you could see the appearance on the bodybuilding stage, and then that's bodybuilding, which everyone obviously uses them. Now we have this such a sad epidemic of body dysmorphia and deaths, premature deaths, on top of the heart disease and everything we have in this country. It's accelerated depending on the genetics, depending on all these other variables, but it's the PED use that has been focused on that we don't fully understand, Vlad. So we have to do more education on this, Vlad. There needs more education for PED use, for what's happening, and looking at who's using it, which is not MLB, it's the common man. And in the end, the problem is with a young man, they're going to be shut down. That's the number one problem. They don't consider they're so young, the heart disease and the complications, and they're very rare. It's very rare to have liver disease. Thank God. It's extremely rare. But what's not rare is when you do even a little bit of steroids, Vlad, some men don't recover and their testicles are shut down. They can't date women. They say, doctor, I can't date women because I can't have sex. And this leads to a depression and a vicious cycle.
Okay. Tony, is there a difference in your opinion between steroid use and steroid abuse? And what is the abuse?
Well, you know, I guess I have to sometimes abuse things in order to learn from it. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, even like my daughter, sometimes she'll do something that I know she's going to get hurt a little bit from, but I'm like, okay, I'm going to wait. I'm just going to let her get hurt a little bit. Nothing that's going to cause permanent damage. I mean, she's a little girl, but with myself, it's the same thing. Like I've got to get a little bit of gyno, and then I'm like, okay, now I realize I've got to control the estrogen. Okay, I get a little bit of hair loss. Oh, now I realize I've got to deal with the DHT pathway and hair loss. And so, like, for me, it's been really fun to navigate all the side effects and figure out how to mitigate all of these side effects while using these compounds. But I understand the mainstream people, you know, that's a lot for them to learn, a lot of the trial and error to go through for them. But if they have access to the information, and now there is a lot more information. You've got Dr. O'Connor and Derek and Steve and all these other guys talking about, you know, ways to mitigate steroid side effects, and there's ways to do it. So, you know, I think you're going to see a lot less abuse. Abuse is when I think the risks or the side effects far outweigh the benefits. You know, because if there's still a huge amount of benefits, but there's some problems happening, then the benefits still outweigh the risks. But if the benefits are outweighed by the risks, then maybe we call that abuse. But through education, that's how we prevent abuse, not by babying everybody and restricting access to them. I mean, how far does that even go? And back to the obesity thing really quick, I think steroids help a lot with the obesity problem, because when people are taking steroids, they're working out, and it's that whole lifestyle. It's pretty rare that people just take steroids and sit on the couch. I just don't see it happen very often. You know, if you take, like for me, if I take steroids, I'm like, okay, I better get to the gym and I better use it, and boom, that's going to fight obesity. If that's the number one health concern, then think about that benefit of steroids.
Dr. O'Connor, anything you want to add to that? And especially, can you explain, is it possible to use steroids without actually abusing them? Is there such thing?
So this is, and again, I hope this is seen by so many people, right? Tony and I are actually getting along really well here. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, there's the line between testosterone utility, TRT, and steroids, right? So many clinicians, they don't understand what's the difference between testosterone and steroids, and it's very simple, right, Tony? It's dose. It's just dose, and it can be a fine line depending on the enzymes and who the man is. But PED use, anabolic steroid PED use, everyone's going to think about competitive athletes. MLB, you got to go back to the 90s with MLB, right, Tony? That's when the laws came into effect, not to protect people, but to lay out and to protect, or set up athletes from cheating. But in the end, Vlad, the number one, the average person using PEDs is a young person, including women. So we have to don't we have a service? Aren't we at service? And don't we have an obligation to protect people as a physician, as a community, from the side effects? And Tony seems great. He's 39. Tony, you're very young. You're very, very young. That's the problem. You're very, very young, and there are going to be consequences. And Tony's agreed that he doesn't mind the risks. Vlad, a lot of young guys, because just by being young, we don't think about longevity because we're just so healthy and we take it for granted. But when you're 35 or 45 or 55, look at the heart. The heart's number one. There's hair loss. Tony, who cares about hair loss? Look, I go to the extreme stuff. Hair loss, gynecomastia, a little bit of acne, but that's cosmetic. I go right to the heart, the kidney, the liver, fertility, and depression.
Tony, I want to add to that actually and ask you a follow-up question. You've made statements before that it's possible to add 15 pounds of lean muscle in approximately 1 week. Would that constitute as steroid abuse at that point if you're trying to go for that type of result?
There's a lot of short-term side effects. There's a lot of massive water retention and fatigue and blood pressure, during that week that we build a huge amount of muscle. But my theory is that there's less long-term side effects by doing that over a shorter period of time. So for a very short period of time, we do everything right. We consume a huge amount of calories and a huge amount of performance-enhancing drugs. Actually, less performance-enhancing drugs than you'd think, but it's for such a short period of time, and usually it's a lot more than someone would take over, on a weekly basis over a longer cycle. And the theory is that, from a side effect mitigation standpoint, is that most of the terrible side effects happen as a result of being on these things for a long period of time, not necessarily the acute short-term dosage. And so by putting all these things together, like growth hormone, insulin, IGF, testosterone, and SARMs and steroids, I don't see any really long-term side effects coming out of that. I mean, let's say building plaque in the arteries, for example. Well, we're only on it for a very short period of time, and then after that, we're off. And yes, okay, this would be harder on the body than being natural, but I think this is a lot less hard on the body than being on a 8-week, 12-week cycle, which if we can build the same amount of muscle in a really short period of time by blasting every pathway, then we save a lot of time and also a lot less likely long-term chronic side effects.
Okay, let's go to the next topic. And actually, it's a follow-up to what you just said, Tony. So you've used steroids, you mentioned, for 9 years, right? And you've experimented on yourself. You've basically dedicated your life for these experimentations. And so far, you've claimed to be healthy and in good condition, obviously, right? The question is, do you think that, and are you worried that you're going to see a bulk of these side effects in the next 10 years or even beyond that? You can start, Tony, and then Dr. Khan, I want to hear what you have to say about that. The long-term effect of these substances.
So I'm not worried about being shut down. Let's say shut down and heart disease being the two biggest, or shut down, heart disease, liver, kidney are the ones we talked about there. So I'm not worried about shutdown. When I was 18 years old, I already knew about steroids, and I had made the decision that I will start testosterone or steroids when my natural testosterone starts declining. And in my mind, I said that's going to be age 35. So my friends were all using it at 18, 19, 20, and I said, I'll wait till I'm 35. That way I can naturally produce testosterone until then, and I don't care if I'm shut down then because I plan on being on TRT the rest of my life and I have no problem with that. I made that decision when I was like 18, 19 years old. And I waited a long time. And then I jumped the gun 5 years and started when I was 30. So I had, liver ultrasounds done and all kinds of liver tests and kidney tests and heart tests, and everything's fine, but I'm due for another test. So if I get, right when I'm back in Thailand, all those tests are really cheap. So when I go back to Thailand and I get all my new heart scans done and everything, and if I see a problem, then I would reconsider, but I haven't seen a problem yet. And I've done I'm not on as many steroids all the time as people think, though. I do more of experiments, so my baseline level is pretty low of what I take, and then I do a large experiment that people think I'm actually taking very large amounts all the time. So it's always important not to take the highlights and just see what I took 1 week, and then the public think that that's what I'm all the time, and that's okay. That's all for learning and experimentation purposes. But yeah, I would reevaluate later. I just have no side effects right now, according to all the testing that I've done. But I also understand there's a lot of people that have predispositions to having side effects, and I think I make those disclaimers pretty clear.
Thank you, Tony. Dr. Khan, I want to know your opinion on this. Obviously, a lot of people, 39, 40 years old, right? They have similar answers as Tony. Do you think they should be concerned specifically for long-term effects that are coming up?
So we see this, and just to start with the evidence, because I'm a physician, the American Heart Association, American College of Cardiology has a premier journal called Circulation. And for anyone who wants to look up the data, you could see Dr. Aaron Bagish, who's a colleague of mine at Harvard, is interested in steroids. He's a cardiologist, and he has at least two very strong publications indicating even short-term use of steroids affect the ejection fraction and lead men into heart failure. And we know now, evidence-based support, that if you have the propensity by any degree for atherosclerosis, which is plaque in the artery, which is #1 cause of death in the country, but it happens later, right, for people, that it's going to be accelerated. So that's the evidence. So where are the bodies? Where's the evidence? There's my presentation to the jury. There it is, Tony. There's my evidence. So you're lucky. Again, Tony, you're very lucky. You're very bright. You're in good shape. You don't overeat. The blasting of steroids has been already documented and proven to be untoward. Just absolutely can be horrendously dangerous depending on what you have in your arteries, your kidney. There are young men that have propensity for FSGS, focal segmental glomerular sclerosis. These, I have to give the real terminologies. This is what I see. And then people say to me with tears, I didn't do much. I did short cycles. Why do I have heart disease? Doctor, he does more. It doesn't work that way. What people have cancer when they're young.
Tony, what do you say to that?
Where are the bodies? Yeah, okay, so Dr. O'Connor's referring to studies that show that this could all be harmful, but when I look out in the world and I see who's having heart attacks and stuff, and we say, oh my God, these bodybuilders are dying young. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are dying young, people who've never done steroids before. I mean, take the fitness lifestyle, you take, because it's rarely just people taking steroids. Usually with steroids comes some sort of bodybuilding and fitness lifestyle, which I think massively outweighs the drawbacks of taking steroids. Because if you compare a fitness steroid user to the average American, usually the fitness steroid user is going to be far healthier in every way. Could they be healthier without the steroids? Yeah, but then being in the fitness lifestyle is not really as fun and appealing, is it? Without steroids, like go to the gym and get discouraged because progress doesn't happen that fast. You're never going to look like the way you really want to look, versus take a little bit of steroids and keep you in the gym and keep you motivated to eat healthy. I think the eating healthy and the fitness lifestyle benefits to health and even for the cardiovascular system far outweigh the average Joe who's dying of heart. A lot of people are dying of heart attacks, obesity, and cancer and all these things from unhealthy lifestyles. Steroids keep people in usually a healthier lifestyle.
Dr. O'Connor, anything to add to that?
Well, Tony, we're looking at apple versus an orange. I mean, the mass of people are dying from heart disease that are not using steroids, correct. But how many people are using steroids versus are eating too much food and then have heart disease? It's a spectrum, Tony. It's a spectrum. It's a ginormous spectrum. But when you put people that have genetic predispositions to coronary artery disease, I see it every day, the steroids can, the functional word is can. They can accelerate atherosclerosis. I see calcium scores, Tony, you know this every day. And we are amazed in my practice with my patients that here's a guy that is 50, he's been on steroids 20, 30 years on, off, blasting, cruising, and he has zero. And then I have a 28 or 34-year-old guy who may have a family history, see the family history of heart disease, and he's on some steroids and he has significant plaque in the artery. You see, so it's all, this is why I want everyone to do a detailed history and physical. Tony, I'm sure you agree. Tony's health, you're a super healthy man. I call that luck. It's luck. You're lucky. So you could push the envelope, but you're 39. You're still very young. So when you get to be 59 or 49, 10 years later, will you have a lower ejection fraction and be tired? Will your erections be poor because your endothelial dysfunction and diastolic dysfunction? Will you have a stent or a bypass? Who cares about the hair and the gynecomastia? Never, thank God, it's not breast cancer, because we see breast cancer in men, but not from steroids. Infertility, Tony, infertility is a bitch. This is a bear.
It's just, it takes so long to possibly develop, so it is just a little bit of an unknown.
Everyone knows you get big and strong, and then the reality is you're not going to be Ronnie Coleman.
They're just going to think they're going to cruise on it, but eventually they lose it, and then they come back and they want to blast again to get the muscle. But you kind of find out that some people's motivation is just to look good.